moderator who's had to be very clear about his own context while being buffered by the changing political paradigms in which he's had to work. Since 1991, he and his family have lived on Kachana, a remote piece of the Kimberley, wrestling with its recovery. He is by far and away a solution-focused and optimistic person. So please welcome Chris Henggeler.
I have a brother-in-law who informs me that if you're over 40 years old and you wake up in the morning, you don't feel any pain, chances are you're already dead. So by that definition, I'm well and alive, but unfortunately my use-by date hasn't had it as fast approaching. So I stand before you here as a witness bearing testimony of what's happened. So for most of the last 40 years, I've been living in remote locations in Northern Australia, and 30 of these have been focused on restoring desertifying ecosystems and the very country that grows droughts, floods, bushfires, and increasingly feral weather. My testimony is derived from working and walking the land, and this also includes hundreds of hours of observation from light aircraft. I have today two messages. In high rainfall areas, desertification is easily masked by seasonal changes. And I think the headlines last week would have reminded a lot of us that by the time the symptoms of desertifying watersheds impact communities, no amount of remedial work downstream is going to reverse any dysfunction upstream. So please join me for a quick zoom into Australia's backyard. What we see here is the Dunham River joining the Ord. Now we're 120 kilometres upstream, where we've spent most of the last 40 years replacing herbivores with fire. And this is where the water begins to get its colour. The flooding actually begins higher up, even higher up in the catchment. We have a skeleton of a landscape with no soil left, bedrock, and that'll supply clean water. And maybe we need to remind ourselves that when the first, well, according to scientists, when the first humans arrived here, these very ranges were covered in rainforest. Now we go to the other side of the range. This is the top of Cockatoo Creek, Upper Cockatoo Creek, the same skeleton of a landscape, same rainfall, also clean water because the soil is long gone. This here's Lower Cockatoo Creek after some rain on the range. We use the vegetation to hold the soil in place and to filter water. And we use, Walter would call them mobile biodigesters, to keep the vegetation healthy. And however, when we set up camp, the land around us was crying for help. Today, Lower Cockatoo Creek has reliable stream flow, perennial stream flow. And the water is now there because of the grass. And the grass is now there because of the way we influence the behaviour of the large herbivores. But there is a catch, and that catch is the larger context. Watersheds in the region continue to desertify, and we get about anywhere between this much and that much water in the season. This pattern is not unique to Northern Australia, so let's just take a quick trip into the future. It's a different context, it's even a different continent, and there's a lot more people, but it's the same pattern. Bare watersheds and bare catchments dehydrate and erode. The low fuel zones, though, remove the fire danger, and we can take advantage of the nutrients that are being washed into the valleys. And wildfire becomes less of an issue. However, droughts and floods increase. Then again, Band-Aid measures boost GDP and create photo opportunities. Eventually, production areas will begin to dehydrate, and people run out of water, and communities are in conflict. We only need to look at the world news to understand the social fallout. At the time, decisions seem easy to justify, but actions have consequences. And when complex dynamic living systems are involved, actions often bring about unintended consequences. Dehydration is a leveler like a few others. An Olympic athlete, a concert pianist, or the obese chain smoker. Take away the fluids for 3 days, and their individual performances will end up just about the same. The best regenerative practices downstream cannot reverse ecological dysfunction upstream. My assessment is that in many regions in Northern Australia, the horse has already bolted. Yet I believe we stand a sporting chance to rein them in. However, for that we need a new generation of land doctors, capable and willing to work in country that is known to be inhospitable. Basic skills that such land doctors will require already exist. I've listed a few on the right there. As the regenerative paradigm begins to nurture second and even third generations of practitioners, there will be those who will step up to the challenge. Competent young people who look beyond cash flow towards rebuilding the natural wealth that underpins the security of any nation. Our point of influence is stockmanship. This is how we influence ultimately all herbivore behavior. The key is grass farming. A rapid increase of photosynthesis can draw down carbon and begin to put it back to where it will work for everybody. The area of maximum impact is soil building. We rebuild and fill up carbon accounts in and on our soils. These three processes reward us with what I call rainfall management. Rainfall management allows us to rehydrate soils, replenish groundwater and aquifers. Note, the rainfall management is actually a result of blending stockmanship and grass farming with soil building. Climate is how we personally, as individuals, get to experience the interaction of these four simple but complex processes. Climate building is what now needs to happen, and it will be achieved by rebuilding the buffering capacity of biology, which in the face of physical forces that are already aligning to determine our extinction as a species. And Walter reminds us that as she's done before, nature will again stabilize climate. The critical question that he leaves for us to answer is, will she do it now with our help, or after us without us? From what I have witnessed in my lifetime, it is actually now too late to be asking such questions. Rebuilding the lost Cockatoo Creek sponge is one of my retirement projects, and I hope that along the way I can inspire budding land doctors.